Another edition of Who Moved the Market. It's Tuesday and I'm your host Surabhi Upadhyay. With me on the show today is Ekta Batra. And Ekta's sector, some of the companies in that sector are really hitting the headlines. In fact, they're burning up the charts, Ekta, with a scorching 20% kind of move on some of these stocks.
Hi Surabhi, yes absolutely. I think there are a lot of analysts who are just talking back and forth and discussing what's changed in the pharmaceutical and healthcare space. Factors such as whether or not there is a fundamental change which has actually taken place in the US markets, whether this is just a Revlimid addition in terms of the earning estimates for a lot of the companies, and whether or not margin improvement is here to stay. So there are multiple factors, but the point is that yes, there has been an earnings recovery which is visible for companies. So we have that tangible data to work with, that companies are doing better in the US. They have less price erosion to reckon with. They have better margins to which they are reporting because of inventories which have sort of eased out, high cost inventories which have eased out, and they are managing to solve their issues better as well. When it comes to regulatory issues, they're managing to get over the hump, or they're managing to sort of make their way around it and still report numbers and still report earnings.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the good season really started with Cipla. I remember we had you on the show back then because they came out with a really strong performance in the US market. Then there was Sun and a couple of others, Lupin, and it's just been sort of one hit after the other when it comes to pharma earnings this season. Now there are two stocks that actually I want to discuss with Ekta today. One of them is Gland Pharma, and that stock's up 20%. And the second actually is Cipla. So in some ways going back to the start, considering that's where the positivity this season really began. Now on Gland, and Ekta, this is interesting because I think Gland, among most of these stocks, was the one that was the weakest of the lot, right? In terms of the stock price, and it was languishing down 30% in the last 1 year. And then you come to these Q1 numbers, which are looking phenomenal, right? Year on year and quarter on quarter.
Absolutely. You have to look at Gland's performance in Q1 in context of what has happened in the back at the for the past couple of quarters. Now, FY22 was quite a volatile year for Gland Pharma. It was a year of two halves. The first half of FY22, Gland Pharma reported what was an excellent set of numbers. They did benefit from multiple factors such as, say, COVID-19 opportunities. The US markets were doing well for them. They were not facing any kind of supply chain disruption. Rest of the world markets were performing. India was doing well. So they were really firing on all cylinders. That's Gland. Second half of FY22, they started facing supply chain disruptions. They started facing raw material issues. They started seeing price erosion in the US. They started seeing competitive pressures in a couple of their key drugs in the US markets, and the B2C or the B2B business in India was impacted for them as well. So these factors sort of played out in the second half, and you could see the margin trajectory for Gland actually falling all the way from highs of around 37 to 38% in Q1 of FY22, all the way to levels of around 31%, 30-odd%, and then crash into a sub 30% and coming down to a 21% in Q4 of FY23. So that's the story that, post the Q4 numbers, in fact, the stock hit a 52-week low. And it has been hitting 52-week lows in the past couple of months, only because the street was so pessimistic on the earnings. And there was news that Fosun Pharma, the parent company of Gland, which is the Chinese company, their holding company is facing liquidity issues in China. So there were multiple factors that were actually pressuring Gland down. That it wasn't only the earnings, but it was also this. So that stock, which was actually considered to be a darling because it is an injectables play. It's always more difficult to manufacture a drug which is an injectable. It goes into your skin as compared to an oral solid dosage. So Gland Pharma was getting that premium from the market simply because they had injectables. That is their primary business, manufacturing injectables. They have done it for regulated markets where 60% of their sales come in from regulated markets such as US, Canada, Australia, where the compliance is much greater, and obviously the margins are higher, and they have a great compliance record as well. You haven't really heard of Gland Pharma running into issues with the regulator.
Some import alert from the plants,
regulator. So they've always managed. So the story seemed to be excellent when they came to the markets. They listed in November 2020 with the issue price of 1,500 rupees. in the next 1 year, it rallied all the way to around 4,200 odd rupees. So the street was very bullish on the story. But all of it came undone as the COVID-19 opportunities dwindled, supply chain pressures hit the company. And something as simple as, injectables were needed for COVID vaccinations. And hence they were facing a supply shortage in their raw materials because of that. So they had to overcome a lot of issues, and the key question at that time was also that many other injectable companies are not facing such issues. Why is Gland consistently facing these issues?
Right.
But they managed to sort of now prove themselves with these Q1 numbers. They have recovered in terms of margins. Adjusted margins are even better at around 29%. But whether or not they sustain this performance is what the street will see.
Okay, so for the benefit of viewers, I just want to go over Ekta's numbers, which we have here. So if you're looking at it year on year, then the revenue is up 41%, the EBITDA has grown by about 9-10%. Margins, as Ekta was mentioning, they've come up to a level of at least 24%. The profit over last year is still down, but quarter on quarter, I think then this performance starts looking even better. So quarter on quarter, that margin, which is at 24%, it's better than Q4's 21%. So quarter on quarter, there is a big recovery. Just a little bit on their businesses and this quarter, I mean, how the different markets have done. So US continues to be a big market for them. That's done well?
Yes, absolutely. The US is a big market for them. They have big drugs which they sell there, such as enoxaparin as well as heparin. So they are very competitive in the in the US markets. These are difficult to manufacture injectable drugs, and they have managed to grow 25% on a Q-on-Q basis. They have reported over 20% growth on a sequential basis. So while the US is down year on year, Q-on-Q it's seen a recovery, which is what the market likes, because the base business is showing stability, price pressure is lower.
Okay, got that. I guess a lot of people will ask the question that, is this really signaling a bottom? Is this a turnaround, and does it get better from here? I'm sure you've looked at a lot of the brokerage notes and commentary that's been coming in right from the morning. What's the sense?
Well, the street and brokerages are optimistic that maybe we've reached a bottom for Gland. Maybe the US is showing a formidable recovery, and a recovery which is here to stay. And that's what other companies have said as well. US has done better for most of them on the base business level as well, not just Revlimid generic, but on the base business level. So that's probably translated into Gland as well. But the sustainability of the numbers is what the street will watch for. Whether or not they will report these kind of margins or an improvement in margins the next quarter, whether they will gain incremental market share in their products, so the US business will Q-on-Q improve next quarter as well, is what the street will watch.
I guess today's stock move can also be attributed to the fact that, like you said, the stock was anyway hitting 52-week lows. I'm guessing it's one of the cheapest stocks in the pharma pack for all the reasons that you mentioned, right?
So, the thing is that Gland Pharma, from an issue price of 1,500 odd rupees, and after hitting levels of 4,200, it corrected to levels of sub 900. I think 860 odd rupees was where the 52-week
quite a roller coaster,
or wherever or thereabouts. So it's been it's like an 80% correction from the top for Gland. So if someone bought it at 4,200 odd rupees and they held on to it, they must be still sort of waiting for that upside to come through. So while it has been a roller coaster ride, you have to look at the stock performance in that context, that yes, it has rallied, but it's still 38% away from its recent 52-week high, and it's still a long way away from that 4,200 levels. It's trading at around, say, 23 to 24 times. At one point in time, the valuations for Gland were around 47 times.
Okay, all right. So there's been a reality reset of sorts on the valuations front as well. Got that. So Gland is an interesting story. You need to see if this turnaround can last, like Ekta said. Ekta, now back to Cipla, and the stocks, by the way, are doing very well today as well. Cipla is up around 3%. Now, we've already discussed the numbers in our previous show, right? They did well in the first quarter. Things seem to be going fine. But since that chat, a couple of other developments have happened, right? This whole talk about whether the promoters are exiting, that seems to be gathering more and more, momentum and steam. And I remember you pointing out earlier in the week that there was some regulatory issue with the US FDA at their Indore plant. that hasn't affected the stock at all. It's not even sort of batted an eyelid. It just keeps going higher and higher. Cipla, by the way, folks, is up 25% in the last 1 month. It's quite a mover in the pharma space. So what's happening?
Well, we all know what's happening right now. 25% move in 1 month is not attributed only to the earnings. There's obviously something else which is probably cooking up for Cipla, and you can see it with the denial for the company as well. When they came out with a denial this time, they didn't refute any sort of reports that were put out. They said that if there's anything material, we will let you all know. And it's just common sense that, you know, this is probably going to be the next step for companies which do not have a clear succession plan. There are multiple companies within the pharmaceutical listed space which we have discussed over and over again about them not having that succession plan in place, or the, you know, the third generation or the second generation of the family not really taking over the business. So they are candidates for a takeover. For Cipla, this has been discussed over the years that, you know, after Dr. Hamid and Mr. M.K. Hamid, who exactly is going to be taking over the business. We have Samina Hamid, who is, who is a part of the business, but she does not have an operational role. So there is this thought process that yes, Cipla will probably be taken over, by a PE fund, a consortium of PE funds. We don't know what the combination would be, and whether or not this would even come through, or the dynamics of it. But the rally is based on the fact that yes, this could probably come through.
Be brewing.
And the Indore facility, they received an official action indicated status, which means that there's a chance that it'll probably get escalated to a warning letter. There's a chance that approvals would be impacted from that particular facility. Now,
is that an important plant for Cipla, the Indore plant?
Exactly. It is an important plant. That is because Advair generic, which is an inhaler drug, is filed from that plant. But the street brushed off the news because of two reasons. One is because the street knew that the Indore facility is probably going to get escalated to an official action indicated status. It was already known when the street saw those 8 observations in the month of Feb that yes, there's a possibility that Advair generic is going to be delayed. So the bad news was already factored in. Everybody knew that Indore is going to get an OAI, and secondly, the company had already prepared analysts saying that we are looking to transfer Advair generic to another facility. They had told us that as well in the press conference, and it will probably take its own time. It will probably be an FY25 opportunity if things go well. And obviously the second reason is that, the street is looking at bigger triggers for Cipla, and hence this news did not come as a surprise, and there are bigger triggers lined up.
Well, whatever be the dosage, whether it's earnings, whether it's possible M&A, consolidation, more investors coming in, the dose is working. That's the bottom line, at least on these two stocks, and actually a lot of the pharma space, in general. Ekta, always great chatting with you. Thank you for putting things in perspective. And now we know why Gland is doing what it's doing, 20% up a circuit, and Cipla is running away, 25% up in 1 month. Thank you very much for all the details. All right, folks, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of the show. Thank you for tuning in. See you again with another theme tomorrow.